Number 4, women were written terribly. Marvel has a problem writing women, something that started in the Silver Age. Women in superhero comics were usually just prizes for the men or damsels in distress, especially when Stan Lee was writing them. Silver Age characters weren't exactly brilliant examples of the multifaceted writing, but women got it worse than anyone. Characters like Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, Wasp, and especially the Invisible Woman, girl, by the way, in the Silver Age, women were written in the worst ways possible. Even when they were obviously the most powerful person on a team, they still were hostage bait or kidnapping fodder. DC was a little better with Superman's prospective girlfriends, Lois Lane and Lana Lang, obsessed with the Man of Steel to the point that their own lives revolved around trying to win him at any cost. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a product of the Comics Code. Before the Comics Code, Lois Lane was much more of a hard-hitting reporter type. She was based on, what was that movie with Cary Grant? Newspaper.
His Girl Friday.
His Girl Friday. She was very much based on that character. And when the Comics Code came up, she was turned into, oh, won't Superman marry me?
So I want to point out that, yeah, I agree that, Storm was written horribly. She never got the sandwiches or anything like that.
Yes. Do you mind if I go first? Because I'm going to have to jump off after this because I haven't.
We all want to jump off after this.
No,
after what I say,
or
okay. There's a little grain of truth to what he says, but here's the thing: this was a hobby for boys, and boys fantasize about. When you're a certain age, you fantasize about being a fireman or an astronaut. You get a little, maybe just a little bit older, and you fantasize about getting the girl. The hero saves the damsel in distress, vanquishes the villain, and they all live happily ever after. That's a basic theme that's gone through comics for decades. But if you go back and read these issues, yeah, there are times when Sue appears to be subservient to Reed, but a lot of times she gives as good as she gets. And a lot of these characters, were formidable in their own rights, but it just basically you hadn't had the women's rights movement yet. So it was written different, but women were as strong and capable as the times which they're written would allow, for lack of a better term. And again, this guy is attaching 2023, which is overcorrected to the point to where who wants to read this shit now when it's the woman is basically in 2023, the woman is what the man was in 1963. And I'm sorry, you just can't flip the genders because someone wants to. You can't rewrite genetics, and it doesn't work because yes, they took a boy's hobby, kicked the boys out, and now get mad because the boys aren't there anymore.
So DC was a little better with I guess the tropes, I guess, because why was Robin always in damsel distress in every single freaking cover?
I have my own theories on that that aren't safe for YouTube.
Well,
look. I just want to piggyback off Eric's. I think he really nailed it. This is a hobby for boys, and of course, anything that's for boys in the 2020s is toxic. So I can see the viewpoint. It's stupid, but look, men and women. Yes, there's two genders. They think differently. They often enjoy different things. Sometimes they overlap. They can. Our resident Maranya, who's a great person, she's a woman. She's been into comics for a long time, but she just loves comics for what they are. She's never presented an idea of like she needs it more feminized. She's not the typical, obviously. And sometimes there's boys that like get into knitting and things like that are typically more associated towards women. It can happen. But when you do this, it's the same thing with like Harlequin romance novels. If we were to just look at that, we could say, well, you just reduce men to tall, dark, and handsome, like just meat puppets. Like, but that's appealing to the woman fantasy that you're writing this romance that they're going to be swept off their feet by this tall, dark, and like it has nothing to do with sexism. It's just appealing to your audience. Eric nailed it right. This is a story about for boys typically that are usually young teenagers, maybe even in their early 20s. They could be in the military, and they, as a boy, there is an appeal for men who have testosterone flowing through their blood, their veins, to be the hero, to rescue the damsel in distress. It's not about a sexist thing. It's about a thing that makes men feel good. It makes men feel valuable in society. We don't get to give birth and raise kids, like birth kids. Like, we don't get to do that. We're not built to that. We're built to be the protector of the family unit. And so our psychology is wired that way. And it's not a bad thing to sort of cater to that a little bit. But you get these feminized men from today, and they don't understand that, and they go, and look, there was nothing more cringe-inducing or disgusting. I don't want to say disgusting, cringe-inducing or just unappealing to me than to read a story as a teenager where the boy got rescued by a girl. Like, that was just like, ooh. And now we've got all these little femboys today that's what they want. They want to write these stories.
Actually,
it's like, look, you can do you, but at least understand the psychology. It's not toxic. If it's healthy to write stories about women saving men, then it's not toxic to write stories about men saving women.
So,
all right, Venk.
So women written terribly. So Sue being written as the strongest team member, also having two men fight over her affection. Jean Grey having all the boys were toxic and actually going after her, except for Bobby, because we know Bobby didn't like girls.
Right, of course.
She put him in. Jean would put him into place. At first, it was the second issue or whatever they introduced her. It's like they don't understand. People did not read the comic books back then. They just assume because it's this time the '60s, it's like or whatever. The women were written horribly. They were written how women acted back in the day. That's how most people it was real life, because guess what? Guys went out and actually talked to girls, so they knew how women act. Now,
sorry.
I'm just saying, it's like, but they also weren't trying to be as authentic as they can. It's a freaking comic book. It's make believe. It's fiction. If it was nonfiction, man, Sue would have been slapping him around. She would have left him for Namer, which she actually did. Later on, she tricked him. Well, I'm just saying, it's like these people who write this stuff don't even read comic books. So I'm not surprised that these articles exist.
I would like to point out at least one thing, and I'm going to go to the golden age for it. First of all, Glenzer said it. It was touched on in the comments here, but were women written more terribly than they are today? And you mentioned an overcorrection, and right now we've got the girl boss, and the girl boss cannot have a good story because they can't be written like real people. You had at one point in time Kitty Pryde one punch a sentinel. These are things that would take entire issues with a whole team fighting them just to deal with one or two of them. They're not written as whole people now. I will venture to say that there were a few issues where they were written paper thin in Silver Age, but the reason why we remember the Invisible Girl and we remember Scarlet Witch and the ones that were mentioned, Lois Lane, is because they were created to be three-dimensional characters. Unfortunately, they've become paper thin. Another thing I want to point out, since it's kind of in the same vein, Wonder Woman wasn't made a secretary in the JSA in the Golden Age because she was a woman. She was made a secretary because they wanted Wonder Woman on the covers of the JSA. So they had her little floating head, but they also had a rule that they were not putting characters who had their own comics into JSA. And therefore, they didn't use her very often until I think issue number 11 or so when she started showing up regularly. Okay. Anyway, quick history there. Let me get a few comments, and then we're going to go on to number 3. And that would be I guess that means it depends on what you consider bad. I think the worst of the modern and Silver Age is the modern age, says Ahsoka. Women were in distress because it's a trope. People tend to want to protect women, so putting them in danger is a response to that. Men are put in danger too, but that's all forgotten. Yeah, I thought the same way with that Joker cover versus all of the covers where guys are put in danger. Marshall Dillon saved Miss Kitty because he was the star. Same deal for comics. Druin is saying, wait a minute. In those FF comics, it was established that Sue actually had the strongest power. In one issue at the end, Sue created a shield around the group, even though she was unconscious. Mama Romita would take this journalist over her knee, says Rami. Let's see. Someone cancel this Ash guy. If he had a YouTube channel, it would be dislike bombed. Let's see. I'm not sure they had just boys in mind when they started running the Lois Lane and Supergirl in their own titties. Titles. Sorry. Freudian slip. Ash said 2 genders, and I thought the stream was going to come to a screeching end. I still miss the old New Mutants. I really like that style of writing as a palate cleanser to the other X titles, says Psycho. Let's see. For a man to save a woman is a selfless act, not a selfish act. My father was 50 when I was born. My mother turned 42 6 days after I was born, says Lucy. And Maranya saying, to be fair, with classic Star Trek, they had to get rid of the #1 second-in-command female character, not because men hated her, but because women hated her. So they did what with Pride? Oh my God, the little Jewish girl that was dealing with being the youngest X-Men. Yeah, she had her own title for a little bit, and in that title, she one-punched a Senate. All right, let's get to